Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all see and hear me clearly. Welcome to our second evening of the Summer School TV as part of the International Summer School on Artificial Intelligence and Games. I am Tommy Thompson. I am your host for the week. And I am looking forward to what we have is a absolutely jam-packed program. We have a lot of guests coming in this evening. And we have a lot to get through as well. So I'm already looking at our production list and quite excited to see where we go next. What we'll do is we'll quickly introduce you to my wonderful co-host, Enrica Loria, who
Hello,
is
everyone.
back once again for more of these shenanigans.
Yeah. We are ready.
We're ready. We got the first
And
one out. We've done the first
we
one.
didn't have any kind of like problems this time. So
I don't think there was a technical audio problem at the start, or at least I don't think I've not had anybody say anything just yet. But in a wonderful turn of events, we have so much to cover. We were actually going to go straight into our first guest, who is jumping in to join us right now. So first of all, hello to Tanya Short, who's joined. You've just joined us live just as we've started the stream. So sorry to drop you in it.
No worries.
But
can you hear me all right?
We can.
Yeah,
We can see and hear you clearly. So
Excellent.
just to introduce for anyone not familiar, Tanya Short is, of course, the creative director over at Kit Fox Games and is a lady of many hats, I believe, and was also, in fact, one of our guest lecturers at the summer school back in, was it 2019 in New York?
2019, yeah, I guess so. So for anybody that wasn't there, do you want to tell us some takeaways of your talk back then?
Honestly, I have given so many talks. It's very difficult for me to remember what that was about. I mean, based on the questions you previewed to me, I assume it was about a little bit about procedural generation, maybe. But I worked in the game industry for many years now. I started out as a volunteer designer, community coordinator for text-based MMOs back in the late 90s. And I got internships, and then I went and got a master's degree in level design. And my first salary job was as an AI designer, which was really a glorified scripter. And some years later, I started Kit Fox. So yeah, I've been salaried now for over 10 years apparently. Wow, going on 15. And Kit Fox is entering its 8th year now. And we've used procedural generation in a few different ways. I edited the 2 textbooks on procedural content generation and procedural game design generation because I find them very interesting as a creator and as a designer and just as an artist. I think that there's a lot of interesting potential when it comes to seeing the computer as a co-author along with the player, because there's always this back and forth that happens between the designer and the player. But having an additional a third agent in that conversation that's the computer is very interesting and contributes things that neither human would have considered. It doesn't necessarily make things easier, but it does make them different. And so I find that interesting.
And you've got quite a busy period on the go for yourselves. Like Kit Fox is very active. I believe you've been working on the Steam and Itch version of Dwarf Fortress, but also Boyfriend Dungeon is hours away. Am I right in saying?
Well, I don't know about hour. I mean, a finite number of hours.
A finite number of hours, most certainly.
Away, yes. I can't announce the release date, but it is soon. Capital S, soon. And we're also publishing games, including Dwarf Fortress, which it's our honor to be able to help the creators with their publishing side and marketing and community management and all that sort of thing. We're probably going to get more into publishing soon, like in the coming couple of years. I think that there's a lot of really cool little games that could use the help finding their audience. And people, when you're a one-person game development team, maybe you don't have the time or energy or interest in managing to make a tweet every day and managing a newsletter every month and all these sorts of things. It sounds easy when you start out, but it is actually basically a full-time job. So I'm happy so far with the games we've been able to help that way.
Is this always been like a vision for yourself, like as KitFox was like originally established, and then you were going to keep going, was to do this sort of thing and kind of work more with other developers, or is it just something that's emerged like kind of organically as a result?
It's been much more of an organic result of seeing where, so what we originally did was we wanted to make our own games, publish our own games. We wanted to be super independent, financially and creatively as much as possible. And that sort of led to us building this strength of community management and product design and things like that. And we were, grateful to our mentors for teaching us. And we also saw all these other designers that would benefit from now this expertise that we've been building. So our original, I don't know if it feels a little bit disingenuous to call it a vision, because really we were just like, let's make a game.
And it's revisionist history. You can say afterwards, it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, it was our vision. But at the time, it's just a bunch of random stuff that happened.
The most I'll say we had a vision was we were given very good advice to leap on opportunities as we saw them. Because most of the successful indie developers that I talked to, they said, well, this is how I did it, but you can't do it that way. And that's what I would say too, is the way we did it, you can't do it anymore. Like our incubator we were part of doesn't exist. The exact things that helped us might not help you in 2021, 2022. But that philosophy of being reactive, of being proactive in finding opportunities and sort of leaping through open doors as you find them remains highly advantageous, I would say, because most people just sort of wait for something to happen and sort of do what they planned, and they're very nervous about changing their plans or being flexible that way. But I think that's been a huge part of why the KitFox games has succeeded so far.
And since you worked so much like in procedural content generation, is that also an important part of the vision, or you'd say that maybe there are some aspects in which procedural content generation is a bad idea or doesn't work that well?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely depends on your game and your intended user experience, whether it's good or bad or just kind of pointless. I think for us, we're seeing that with market pressures on commercial products, there's more and more reason to try and make your games more replayable, more longer. There's so many different reasons, whether it's in the Steam ecosystem or if it's in Game Pass ecosystem. There's so many different places for a game to succeed more if it engages players longer. And so for those of us who don't have a team of 1,000 people, that comes down to replayability. And procedural generation is one way to get replayability. There's many other ways, multiplayer or user content generation, that kind of thing. But for us, like I said, I'm personally interested in procedural generation, but I can't say that all of KitFox's games will have that as a major element. I think it's pretty clear that after this many games, we're very interested in systems-driven games, just because as a designer, I find those much more interesting to work on and much more fun to play. And usually they tend to have some element of narrative, role-playing-ish elements. But other than that, I refuse to restrict myself too highly, because I'd rather, like I said, be reactive to what I see as an opportunity in the future.
Well, sounds like there's some very exciting things. I think, think just kind of procedural generation on the horizon. I think in terms of, like, for example, like everything we covered in the summer school today, lots of ground there for all of the people actually attending the school to think about. Like, is there an exciting thing for you? Is there like one thing that you're thinking about? And realize that we're very precious on time. I just want to get your thought on this. Is there something really exciting that you're thinking about right now? Like, can we capture this? Is this the next thing that you wonder that we might be able to harness and use in an interesting way?
Well, I think what I'm fundamentally interested in is the challenge. And this is extra difficult, but I think it's rich exploration grounds of combining a lot of the machine learning tools that have popped up in the last few years and using them to generate elements of the game as an art director, rather than right now, what tends to happen is that you create modules for the recombinator to sort of shuffle around, right? It's almost like you're making cards in a deck when you're making chunks of a level or things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing more and more like Art Breeder, and I forget what the name of the other one is, but there's more and more tools where you can make a little bit even lower level than that. It's more like you're making pieces of images that could become cards in this metaphor. So what I'm hoping to do, like we're looking at creating a more systemic procedural game that's bigger than ever before. And this is not an announced game or anything like this, but in the next few years, we're going to be doing this probably. And in that, I'm going to be exploring using Art Breeder and other tools to make characters almost from scratch. And being able to animate them and have them have interesting personality traits and relationships and opinions on things, all these sorts of things. I think if you give players even the smallest crumb of information about a character, they'll make up their own story and understanding of who that character is and what they're trying to do and what their backstory is. And I think that that's the success of Dwarf Fortress, is that they very expertly picked the right crumbs to let people build those stories for themselves. And that's the big challenge that I'm excited about. But I think that there's a lot more that can be done there. I think we don't all have to be as deep as Dwarf Fortress to get some of those effects of seeing interesting little people doing interesting little things and sort of shepherding them towards some kind of end goal. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping more people look at procedural people and figure out some interesting frameworks for that.
Sounds. I would actually love just to just keep you here for the next half an hour, because I've got 101 questions off the back of this. This all sounds very exciting, but I realise that we're very precious for time here. So Tanya, thank you so much for joining us. I really wish you all the best.
Good luck to everybody. And you can hit me up on Twitter if you have more specific questions or enthusiasms. I do check it every day.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump back here. Oh, right, everybody. So we started off immediately with Tanya Short, given that this is our whole day on AI for generation and what have you. And of course, one of the textbooks, just as Tanya happened to mention it, was the procedural generation in game design. Now, this is actually quite a relevant textbook, given so Tanya edited it alongside Taran Adams, who's one of the developers on Dwarf Fortress, but it actually has chapters in the book that are written by Joris Dorman, who was providing one of the talks today for us. Now, of course, you might be thinking, let's stick a bit of procedural generation into our jam game. And what better bunch of guests to bring in next than two people who can wear with pride that they were in fact winners of the Summer School Game Jam. So let's give a warm welcome to two more guests. We're actually just going straight in now. Please give a warm welcome to Amy Hoover and Lisa Soros. Hello, everybody.
Hello, nice to see you.
Oh, yes, good to see you both. I'm all just like, oh my God, there's so much going on. We've got so many people in. Quite jazzed. Please tell the audience a little bit about yourselves. Amy, do you want to start first?
Sure. I am an assistant professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I do evolutionary computation type PCG, and Lisa and I, as you just said, Tommy, we were at the AI School Summer 2019, and we did a game for the Game Jam that we ended up getting an award for.
Ooh.
And so you were the winners, as we said multiple times. Do you have any tips for our jammers now? They're like rushing into the.
I see. We enjoyed ourselves, I think.
I see why we brought you here now.
Lisa, do you have any tips? I think we really enjoyed ourselves. We tried to use components that were, I think we used Was it Pac-Man, Lisa?
Yeah, it was Pac-Man. So like the premise of the game was Pac-Man, but it gets harder if you don't smile. So there's a camera. So you have to force yourself to keep smiling. Keep it simple is what I would say. And that's why we were using like pre-trained, because like stuff's gonna go wrong. No matter what you do, stuff goes wrong. But like especially stuff goes wrong when you have like 2 days to do something in a game jam. Yeah. And I think that was called, what was it called? Be Happy?
It might have been Be Happy.
Be Happy.
Because you had to, the more you frowned, the harder it got.
That sounds fun. And Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Lisa. I'm a postdoc at Cross Labs, which is a research institute in Japan. I'm based in the US, but we study artificial life, complex systems, kind of mathematical basis of intelligence. And then last year I was in the game innovation lab as a postdoc. So I'm kind of doing stuff that's like biologically inspired virtual worlds kind of games, kind of all over the place.
That sounds quite exciting, particularly, generating content around the premise of artificial evolution as well, and kind of biosystems and what have you. Like, what are you finding are like challenges of applying like this sort of approach towards generating games or kind of game related content?
Yeah, for me, I would say like specifically when stuff is inspired by these systems in the real world, it's like, what's the right level of description? Do we want to take inspiration from like biology or chemistry or physics, or I don't know, maybe information theory or somewhere else? That's probably the hardest part to me.
You said, what is the right what, Lisa?
The level of description of like the world.
World. I'm taking that in. I see. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the answer that is the better answer to Tommy's question, Lisa, that you just gave. But I was just thinking of using the differences between search-based PCG methods, which, who knows what the hell you end up with search-based in the canonical way of we're looking more at, we don't know what we get out of the algorithms that we're writing versus the constructionist approach. By the way, if it's not obvious, I've been reading a lot. I've been going through the catalog of years of PCG research. So that's why I'm using the terms. But if you don't know what you're going to get at the end, I would say that that's one of the biggest challenges is how do you make that fun when you're, going through some stuff that maybe isn't so enjoyable.
Like thinking particularly about enjoyable as well. Like, and this is I think this is an interesting question because it's something I haven't personally explored, but particularly if you're doing kind of evolutionary generation of things like art or music. Ooh. Like, it strikes me there's an interesting fine line where you might not be enjoying it. Like, particularly, like, so I know that actually, Amy, I know some of your work has been in generative music over the years. Is there a point where that's just a din? How do you get it from being a din to actually being something like interesting to listen to?
That's a fantastic question, and I told myself a joke in my head, and I can't say that one out loud. But I mean, Mark and Julian worked with a master's student, I think, at ITU, who himself was a musician. And it's like Audio Overdrive might be the name of the system. I'll end up double checking, but Audio Overdrive, is that it? Anyway, it sounds awesome. I watched the YouTube video. It was a paper. I forget where it was published. And it sounds to me I started listening to the track, which is just this YouTube demo video of, what do they say? Like, the game is bidirectional, where the gameplay, it's been a while now I'm thinking about it, but the way that you play the game influences something about the way that what you see in the game level is influenced by what you're hearing and how you're doing. Don't quote me on that, but they got it to sound very good. I would, it's hard, but he's a musician. That was the point, trying to find what I was trying to say. But otherwise, you just have to have musical instinct for a lot of it. And that's not the fun part of I don't know, generating generating algorithms maybe is you're trying to, depending on who you are, but if you don't have the musical expertise, which is often how PCG tends to be advertised to some people, if you, that I'm going to leave it on that negative note, Tommy. Do you think you can take
I'm filling in the blanks. I'm filling in the blanks. Our top production team confirms that it was audio overdrive, but they don't remember where it was published. Why are we even? I don't know. Why are we paying you guys? Why are you here? What do you do? Come on. God, jeez. Anyway.
Awesome.
Sorry, I just derailed this for a second.
So since you left that on a negative note, like, what do you think it's gonna be in the next future? So will we like have more positive, like not positive, but it will be easier to develop those kind of things, even though you don't have the expertise? Or in general, what do you see in the future?
Certainly hope so. Yeah, I mean, that's just a fantastic question. I certainly hope so, because hopefully, I haven't been as up to date on the research. I imagine a lot of people with COVID are feeling a little out of the loop, we could say. And so a little out of it, but I mean, you have to think it's getting better. The tools are getting better. We have access to, processing raw audio and digital signal processing type things are difficult. I have not listened to something that OpenAI did with respect to music. Lisa might have heard it, but it seems to be getting better. And I would think that just over time, we will develop the tools for it. I remember there was a panel at GDC and maybe it was 2018, where just hearing all of these people that were excited about PCG, and you're like, in video games, and I wasn't around for the early days of PCG, but early enough that I was really excited to see that people are getting serious about it. And part of it, I also remember, what is his name? Shit. But also part of it is us understanding the workflow, better understanding us as academics. I mean, who knows who watches, but academics and people from industry seem to be getting better at communicating and integrating with each other's workflows. Amy, stop talking. Lisa, did you have anything to say about that as well?
I love hearing from you. I think this is great. And I sound like an asshole and like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not. I just have a natural monotone. For those of us, and anybody didn't know, Amy and I did our PhDs together, but so we know each other. But what I think's been interesting is some of these integrations with systems like Clip, where you can have things like, so for instance, my student or my intern, Kevin, shout out to Kevin Franz, if you're watching this, made a system that draws things based on clips and GPT-3. So basically you can just have a text prompt and then get 2D art, 3D art in various styles. So I think systems like that are helping maybe not people make their own tools, but at least reaching out more to people that would be like very, very casual users and kind of letting them play with things and have fun and have that joy of like, what's it going to make, you know?
Why do you think though that they wouldn't be able to build? So Clip, I'm not sure what Clip is. Is that something similar to GPT-3?
That's a great question.
Ignore that question. Next thing. If you think of something like GPT-3 though, don't you think that, well, okay, I think it costs money to use. So if you were to use a generation, like if you were to get if you were to use it in your own thing, it probably costs money. And so I'm answering my own question that I was trying to ask you, which is why do you think that you wouldn't be able to use something like GPT-3?
Yeah, to answer the question though, yeah, Clip is like it's a neural system that connects text and visual stuff. It's a tool from OpenAI.
Oh, we actually just realised we're going to have to wrap up the second to get on to our next guests, but we just had a question come in from the feed. Two things came in from the live feed. First of all, Yorgos Yanakakis, all right, boss, chimes in to say that it was Marcos Guerrea. That was Audio Overdrive. He was the author of that work. So Marcos Guerrea.
Was it really though? Okay, all right.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to argue. The other thing is we've also had
Mark.
from Vladislav on the chat there. Is there a chance we could get a link to your game? So from the Game Jam, is it hosted anywhere?
I can go try to find it, but I think we had to have a website. I don't know if that still exists.
If you do, let us know. We can try and put it over
Sure.
in the Discord server for afterwards. But yeah, we'll have to love you and leave you for now. But thank you both so much for joining us. This has been great fun. I feel like big hugs. I haven't seen you in so long.
Thank you for having us. Have a great evening, afternoon, wherever.
Whatever it is, whatever
Yeah.
you're doing, I hope
Amy
it's great.
said it will. See ya.
Take care. Oh, there we go. Oh, little madness there. Just catching up. Look, I'm trying to figure out how red in the face I am. So as we're getting ready for our next guests, one of the fun things was the production team told me to try and make my skin look more human. So that's been an interesting process for me because anybody who's not met me in real life, so I'm originally from Scotland, in case you haven't figured that out. I am a very pale human being, so I don't look great in natural light, and so we're trying to figure out a way to mitigate against that. So without further ado, like I said, action-packed episode today. So we have our fourth guest of the day, and this is before we even get on to our wonderful panel as well. We have our fourth guest. Please give a warm welcome to Jailin Liu. Hello, Jailin.
Hi, Tommy.
How you doing?
Hello, Enrica. How are you doing?
Hi.
Good.
Yeah, we're good.
How's things
Can
with
you hear me
yourself?
well? Thank you. I'm not very confident with my internet, so can you hear me well?
Yep, great.
Oh, that's great.
Great. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing?
Okay. So, hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Liu. I'm currently a researcher at the Southern University of Science and Technology, Shenzhen, China, with many big game companies here. And I had done my PhD in France with Olivier Teto and Max Schnower. And then I moved to the UK for postdoc with Simon Lucas. And I work closely with Diego Behelia-Bana as well, and with many other people. Yeah.
Okay. And so we know that you have an upcoming paper for COG, which sounds very nice. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, which one? Actually, we have two papers. I'm joking. I know which one, the one you are talking about. I guess you are talking about the one Georgios has previously mentioned in his talk, the experience-driven procedural content generation via reinforcement learning. What's the name? The Super Mario Bros. Study, right? Actually, Georgios call it EDRL for short, but I call it like unreachable print size. Because in this paper, we achieved to do like online endless level generation. So in the Mario game, you can never see the print size if the level is endless.
Cool.
Yeah, so Georgios has mentioned about this paper before. Actually, it's our collaborative work. The first author is my student, Tianye Shu. Last year, he and another student, Ziqi Wang, found that in the Mario game paper published in 2018, there was broken pipes inside.
Yeah.
So they tried to fix the pipe with neural nets and genetic algorithm. It was a success. Then this year, they found Tianye found he's very inspired by the PCG-RL work. He wants to apply PCG-RL to Mario game. Then we did this work. We use his evolutionary repair to repair the broken pipes, and we use ASR state agent to guarantee the playability of the levels. So we achieve in generating playable level in real time, like less than 1 second per segment. That was great work. Actually, the paper is online. The project is on GitHub. If you are interested, please go and have a look.
Excellent.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very interesting. So everybody go look at the paper and if you have the chance, meet Jianli at the conference. And for our newest member of the summer school, what do you think will be up next in procedural content generation? What's like in the immediate future?
I think for the PCG, for the new members to this summer school, starting to get to know PCG or starting some project, it may be good to find some open source project like the Mario Game paper is an example of PCG-R01 or EDR01. So they can get an open source project. They can find some future work inside. But in particular, actually, there is one thing I'm quite interested in, but my students find it boring. That's the puzzle game generation with Angry Birds. I really love it. If you look at the Angry Bird level generation, it's not as easy as we considered. There are many existing approaches that we can apply, but how do you evaluate Angry Bird level, right? How fine it is, how difficult it is, and how to, distinguish the preference of players. That's very hard. I find it's very interesting. And if not for beginners, there's something I'm very interested in is to generating multiple types of content at the same time, simultaneously, because all the types collaborate together to create experience for players. Yes.
I wonder whether it's because, I don't know, is Angry Birds still cool anymore? Is that what it is?
Is Super Mario still cool?
Fair point. Just to wrap
They
up.
are classic.
It is a classic, but there's a point where it's like there's only so much Mario research I think one can consume in the week. Speaking of, is there any, like, for the remainder of the week, is there any particular segments you're still looking forward to in the school that you're hoping to check out?
You mean particular? Sorry.
Like any particular talks that are coming up throughout the rest of the week, or are you just looking forward to maybe seeing what comes out of the jam? Like, is there any highlights for you in the next couple of days?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't able to join the jam because of jet lag, but I'm quite looking forward to the future talks by judges for experience-driven PCG and for other speakers from industry, because I do not work closely with industry. I'm really keen to know what's happening there and what's their problems to be solved. Yes.
Excellent. Well, Jailin, it's been so great to see you again. Wishing you all the best, and we'll hopefully get to speak to you again soon.
You too.
Take
Enjoy
care.
the summer school. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, there we go. Warm thank you, rather, once again to Jailin Liu, who's joined us from all the way over in China. Absolutely fantastic. So, and speaking of, I think particularly because, as you might have gathered, today was all about generative systems being used for AI, and we've had a variety of different talks, which are actually going to be very interestingly wrapped up by our panel momentarily. But particularly referring to what Jailin was saying there, we've got a bunch of interesting talks, particularly on AI for applying AI for playtesting, but also looking at analytics and what have you over the next couple of days. So today, to wrap up, because as you can clearly tell, we've been over ambitious. We were just like, right, we're just going to get everyone on. So now we have an absolutely bumper panel for you as well. And I'm just double checking that I've got all my notes ready. And that all our panelists are here too, because I get to see them on the other screen. So please give a warm welcome to our panel. First of all, we have Vanessa Volts and Sam Snodgrass from over at Model AI, who both gave a talk today on when a feature is too difficult to model with AI, don't. We have Joris Dormans, who's the founder and developer of Ludomotion, who also gave a talk today on foreshadowing generative content and is currently working on Unexplored 2, The Wayfarer's Legacy, which is in early access now on the Epic Game Store. And last but most certainly not least, we've got a fresh face. We actually have Daniel McDuff, who is principal researcher at Microsoft in the Human Understanding and Empathy Group, who is actually giving a talk tomorrow on AI, human understanding, and empathy in gaming. So hello and welcome, everyone. I'm just going to turn my head over this way so I can see you all. You're just absolutely intimidated by that opening segment. How are we doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah.
Good.
I'm exhausted because I think I just managed to almost successfully introduce everyone. But yeah, first of all, welcome to all of you. I figured we would take a moment to... I've got a bunch of questions here. We have so many questions that we were going to raise up here. And it was very interesting. And I actually thought I wanted to start with asking Daniel a question. Sorry, just going to start immediately with yourself. But one of the things that happened yesterday on the show was we were talking about measuring fun in an interesting kind of potentially analytical way. And of course, this is completely unrealistic to come up with magic functions and what have you. Like, to what extent do you think, and I think this also applies to a lot of the generative systems, but how much of this do you think that can you apply emotion detection to give an acceptable estimate on sort of player experience and fun?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm probably, it feels strange to explain fun in this way because it's not great at a party to explain fun in terms of an algorithm, but there are certainly ways to measure user experience that give a lot of rich information about what people are feeling at the time. And the biggest challenges, and I'll talk about some of these tomorrow, are about how we bring context into the interpretation of that. So what fun looks like in one context in one game could be very different from what it looks like in another type of context, another type of game. Some people want to be challenged, that's fun to them. Other people want to be entertained, they want to be more consumers of maybe it's comedic content or other things. So that's the biggest challenge when we think about measuring fun is about trying to interpret it in the context in which it's the content is intending to elicit responses.
And I think certainly like thinking about content and kind of the elicit of the response, that's particularly, actually that was something that was sitting in the back of my head, particularly during Joris's talk earlier today, because you've been thinking a lot about generative systems and like how you're trying to establish context of the generative output and how that fits within the world. And it got me thinking a lot about the kind of holistic element of generation and sort of creating worlds that are going to be satisfying and interesting to explore, and then eliciting those kind of emotional responses along the way.
So what is the question in there? Because
I guess
all true.
I guess that strikes me as very hard. Where do you even start with that?
Right. It is. Well, it is hard, but at the same time, I think for me, the games that I'm working on Explore 2, most of the fun comes from being able to interact with the world and to make the world feel live and novel all the time. And that's where the content generation comes in, because we're always creating this experience, and because the experience is not pre-baked and it's there especially for you. That gives it so much, such a special quality that it becomes fun very, very quickly, especially if you feel the agency and the possibilities of the consequences of anything that you do inside that game. I like roguelikes and I like working on these generative games because if you win in those games, that victory is really yours, right? So you didn't just jump through the hoops a designer set up for you. And that makes that experience special, and that's the type of fun. Because as Daniel said, there's all kinds of fun in games, but that type of fun where you're an adventurer and your victory is truly yours. That's a special type of fun, and that's the one that I'm pursuing.
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting point and advantage of procedural content generation. But I was wondering, when you have a specific story in mind that you want to convey, can procedural content generation just get in the way a little bit? For instance, if you want also to connect with the emotion discussion, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe kind of direct the emotion in a way that they're not what you or the player want.
Well, I don't really have target stories in mind, right? So I have target emotions in mind, so it makes it a little bit more lightweight. And what I do is make sure that there is enough story-like elements in the game, and players will connect the dots ultimately, right? So you don't have to provide the story; you just have to provide enough story-like elements and structure, and people will find their own stories. So for me, it's very important that the goals that we have as a game, it's very simple, right? So the premise that Unexplored 2 has is basically Lord of the Rings. You handed this magic staff, you need to destroy it, and to do so, you need to cross the world to the other side, and that's it, right? So that's all the narrative framing it does. Although there's a lot of narrative content elsewhere, but it doesn't really try to make that into a 3-act structure or do some plot twist there. No, that all comes out of the system. That's all emergent, and that's also what you put in there as a player.
It strikes me there's some I don't know, I'm quite excited to actually sit down and play a bit more of Unexplored 2. I had the pleasure of checking it out earlier on in the year. Shameless plug. There's an episode of AI in Games about the first Unexplored, and I think Joris and I, we've threatened to do something on Unexplored 2 when we find time. But like, it seems already that you're able to tackle these much larger, more ambitious projects, and that really gets to me thinking about like what are the biggest challenges that we still need to face for procedural generation in games, and particularly Vanessa and Sam. I thought your talk today was really interesting because you're showing here's some really interesting problems that we could apply a variety of different techniques for procedural generation. Oh, some of these aren't great, and some of these don't work. And maybe something simpler actually would work out better. Like, what do you get? I guess, Sam, maybe start with yourself. Like, what do you think is sort of the next big challenge to be faced in kind of PCG for games?
Yeah, so that's a tough question because I think
sorry, it's a nasty one to start with.
There's because there's kind of like two streams of PCG research. There's many, but two big ones are like PCG tools, so like offline generation where you can do a bit more curation and make sure you're selecting the things that are good, and then online generation, so like things are being created while someone's playing. You can do less curation, so there needs to be a lot more built into the system of like safeguards kind of. And so I think for the tools side of things, one of the big challenges is making them more accessible and like robust for actual designers to use, which is part of what we talked about in the talk, like trying to use these simpler models and like expose more of this control and give more power to the designer to guide the generator to make it do the things that they want, instead of having to like sift through this 1,000 bowls of oatmeal problem, right?
Like it's interesting because I was actually going to ask Vanessa this question originally, but you gave me the rabbit in headlights look immediately. I was like, oh no. So I thought I'm going to pivot over to Sam. But I guess like as part of that experience, did you have like have you had any memorable experiences on like testing generated content and debugging, particularly as you've been going through this, experience of trying different techniques to solve the same problem? Is there any kind of memorable stories that came out of that?
Is that directed at me or Vanessa?
Sorry, it was directed at Vanessa, but I'm not sure.
Oh.
Sorry.
I did not get that. I've mostly worked on the bot part, and there are definitely some things where we finally started visualizing what the bot was doing, and it wasn't just rules or moves, where we were questioning the bot sanity and then found some bugs because of that. And that's a general thing that we found. Visualizing as much as possible really helps with the debugging part.
Talking a little bit about like the challenges that are open for the future, I was wondering if the current tools and algorithm that we have now, how easily they are scalable in multiplayer environment, and if they will ever be. I don't know, maybe Joris, do you want to take this?
Sure. I think we have a lot of tools already there, and the real challenge is not the technology but the design. So we don't know yet how things affect design. To give an example from a multiplayer perspective, and something that came up during Julian's talk earlier today. Now, I sometimes give this example of map generation for StarCraft, right? So multiplayer StarCraft thing. Right now, if you look at sorry, hang on. My voice now. So if you look at a multiplayer StarCraft map, it tends to be quite symmetrical, because that makes sure that the game is fair and balanced in that way. But what content generation allows you to do is generate every map for a single use, right? So, and then you can have a competitive map, a competitive match on a map that nobody knows beforehand, and that will completely change the game. And that will also give you some opportunities, for example, as a handicapping system. So if I'm a very poor StarCraft player and I play against Sam, who looks like he's a pro, then you might have a competitive match just because the map is taking that into account. And maybe I'll still win 9 out of 10 times, but at least it gives me that 1 in a 10 shot that makes it worth playing for. And I think all these things, we've hardly explored those type of applications, and we can actually be much more radical about the implementations and the implications that procedural content generation might have for design. And I don't think we need to do much on the technical side for that. We just need to get companies, players, designers in the right state of in the right frame of mind.
Okay, yeah, that's a very, very interesting perspective. Okay, so and you said, right, if we talk about multiplayer competitive environment, then you can want to kind of kind of balance the difficulty for both players a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's one thing that you might do, right? So in a multiplayer environment, we're also always very afraid of things have to be fair, but that's just because of the current situation where all the designs are known beforehand, right? So, but if you generate a map, that doesn't necessarily apply. And that opens up new design space, new design territory that we've hardly been exploring.
Yeah, definitely. But I was still on this line. I was thinking mostly for like Daniel, but thinking about like emotional aware computing. If you want to embed this in a multiplayer environment, and so generate a level or whatever that kind of depends on both players, will that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. So one example of a game where some of our technology was used is called Nevermind, which is where the state of the player in the game was influenced by the expressions or the physiological state of the player. And you could definitely see how that could be expanded to a multiplayer setting. And I actually think in multiplayer settings, it becomes much more interesting because, whether this is collaborative or antagonistic, the role that emotions play is heightened in social interactions. So you could have sort of implicit social interactions through interacting with other game entities, but you could have explicit social interactions interacting with other players, human players of the game. And I think in that context, you're likely to get heightened both observable and internal emotional states, because it matters more to people often when they can when there's another human that's involved in that situation. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for thinking about ways to bring that into the game. The most obvious, I think, is controlling the capabilities of the agent that you're controlling. So if my heart rate goes up, then that means that my agent in the game is going to be influenced in a certain way. Maybe it's energy levels deplete more quickly, or those types of things. But you could also think about more creative ways of mapping how my emotion might influence things in the game, not just the agent I'm controlling, but other aspects of the environment. So, and one example of that might be, taking a racing game where you could make the weather conditions or other things influenced by what I'm expressing to make it more difficult, make it more challenging, make it more enjoyable, that type of thing.
Like I really like that idea in the context of it's almost like co-creation in some strange way if you were to use that in a procedural generation context to allow maybe a slightly more aggressive or competitive player alongside someone who's arguably more relaxed, and like have different objectives and different goals within the same space, and then having the world change around them as a result of their both actions within the world space, but also any additional like emotional or experiential data that you're gathering. I think would be really exciting. Which I guess kind of ties into my last question for you all is sort of, what do you think kind of long term, what do you think is just over the horizon? What do you think is like the next big innovation, or what would you like to see next from like generative algorithms and what have you? I'll start with Vanessa. What do you think? What's the thing you're thinking about, you're excited about, that you would like to see?
Well, the thing is, I'm very excited about evaluation, but I don't think it's on the horizon at all. From what we've discussed here, there's so many layers already that we've touched on, like the input, like the players behave differently, then what is fun anyway, and how do you model that? Then you might combine different people, and then it's a combinatorial explosion. And then people are like very chill or something, and they don't respond. So there's so many potential problems with all of that I think it's not around the corner, but it is very powerful if we get to it. And also the stages towards it will still be interesting. I like Joris's point around maybe like evaluation around a specific design intention is closer around the corner if you can like specify what you're going for. But I mean, we found at the end that characterization based on what people were interested in is a stepping stone towards being able to compare different created content.
I think also you're a big fan of benchmarks and making sure that we actually have benchmarks to assess our work against, which is something that I know you're very passionate about in your other work.
Which is my very favorite anecdote, that if you run existing optimization algorithms on some of the standard fitness function that we found, they perform as well as random search. So the optimization algorithms don't really know what to do with these spaces we often create. And then the fitness functions don't agree with each other anyway. So there's lots of potential exploration and like understanding waiting to happen, I think, if we get more data.
Sam, what are you thinking? What's your kind of distant horizon idea that you're excited for?
Distant horizon. So I'm really excited for like machine learning based PCG to be as accessible and widely used as other PCG methods. So I think it's starting to get there a bit with all the wave function collapse stuff that has been happening the last few years. That's been like a big boon for PCGML. And I think still like building out those models and building out these algorithms and making them more explainable, more understandable, more tunable, more easily, like more so that you could just like grab one and throw some of your data in it and get something reasonable out. That's where I'm hoping things go in the next couple years.
I mean, we're here at the summer school. We're educating the next generation. I'm publishing videos on this stuff, so hopefully we're going to help make a dent in that. Speaking of like kind of tools and using tools to facilitate our means, Joris, as a man who has written many a tool, what's your perspective on this? What are you looking forward to in the future?
Actually, I'm looking forward to games without save games. Because I do hope that the roguelike, which is now a sort of the permadeath, which is now something of a niche still, or a genre. It's growing very fast, but with the PCG techniques on the rise and bigger studios catching on, hopefully AAA's catching on soon, we'll get to a state where the save game and the regime of the save game and all that implies for the experience and the possibilities of playing is finally going to go, and it's going to be a something in the side note in the history of games. I'm not quite sure if that will happen, but that's something I'm hoping for.
I love that idea.
Okay, clearly,
it means that you have to approach games a little bit different, right? So it makes every game experience much more like a tabletop. Games do not necessarily have to be hard, as a result. You don't have to die as many times, but it adds so much tension, so much excitement, and so much possibilities in the design space for what a game should be like and would play like. But I still hope that we can get there, that we can get rid of those set games.
Excellent. What about yourself, Daniel? What's got you excited in the future?
From my perspective, I mean, this is my own bias, but it would be solving that problem of how we extend, these implicit inputs that can play roles in games, such as what you're expressing, what you're emoting, your physiological state, bringing that into the game to influence the environment, to influence the agents you're controlling. The measurement side, we have lots of tools to measure physiology, wearable sensors, we've got computer vision tools, but the measurement is not the end goal here. It's creating that mapping between what you can measure and how you can create a compelling experience. And that to me is still a very unsolved problem, and there could be some really exciting opportunities if that could be solved, not only to make games more enjoyable and engaging, but also thinking about where it could take things like biofeedback and helping people relax and de-stress and things like that. If you could create experiences that could help people learn some of those tools as well as enjoying the game, that has could have a big impact on overall well-being. And
it sounds certainly like a very it's a very exciting prospect, and I say that from two perspectives, because one, the last year or so that we've had, everyone's been at home playing games as a mechanism to try and relax and try and de-stress. And then also I've been playing Dead by Daylight all week, which is a horror game, and now I'm thinking, oh no, that's not the type of game I want to have that sort of interaction with. But yes, absolutely. I would love to have you all chat with us for another hour, but we're just about to wrap up for this segment. So yes, Vanessa, Sam, Joris, and Daniel, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you all have a great remainder of the week at the summer school. And Daniel, look forward to your talk tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Oh, right. There we go, everybody. A bumper panel. Vanessa Volts, Sam Snodgrass, Joris Dormans, and Daniel McDuff. And just to quickly highlight that for you, just in case you're not familiar. So Daniel will be giving his talk at 1400 CEST. That's 2 o'clock on our schedule. AI, Human Understanding, and Empathy in Gaming. So we're going to bump back over to Enrica. How are we doing?
Hey again.
You're still here. You're stuck with me.
Not going anywhere.
Oh, I think we're done.
Yes.
By and large.
Yes.
It was a wonderful bunch of guests we had today.
Yeah, and we had so many other questions that we wanted to ask, but yeah, I mean, I think we made a very good selection. The conversation was very engaging.
Yes, I would like to make a special shout out to our top production team as a whole. Enrica did a great job of providing even more questions. I always find that the most dangerous part is whenever we're sitting down, we're having our production notes coming together. It's like, what do we ask all these people that we've got coming in? And it's funny because I freeze so many times, and then Enrica's like, I know exactly what we'll ask them and what have you. Also, I think I need to say this, a special thanks to both Antonius Liapis and David Melhart, because I know Antonius was a bit salty. He didn't get a thanks at the end of the last video. So I made a point of putting it in the production notes.
Such a great job. I mean, without Antonius, like that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, Tommy is just like the face, but
yes.
Yeah.
If you imagine that I'm the face, I'm one of the two faces. I'm the one that pushes all the buttons. Enrica's here to keep me in check. Antonius is really imagine somebody angrily typing into a Discord feed for an hour, and then that gives you an idea of he's typing right now. Thank you, I appreciate it, he says. So there we go. Like, I think he meant when I highlighted him, not when I just said that he just angrily types at me for an hour. But that gives you an idea of the experience of running one of these sessions. So yes, we have another bumper session lined up for tomorrow, which will tie into Wednesday's program, which was on AI for experience, and that's going to tie into player modeling. We're going to be having, empathy, looking at user data. So we've got a really exciting set of talks at the summer school from Daniel. We have Luke Dickin from Zynga coming in, and we also have really exciting talks from both Yergos as well as David Melhart. And the team who worked on the predictive player personal attributes from gameplay data, which was particularly working with Ubisoft, I believe, on The Division. So yeah, another busy day. Another busy day. We should stop.
And yeah, yeah, we
stop.
should.
That's a good idea. But yes, thank you all so much. Thank you, Enrica, once again, for steering me through. Thank you to all of you tuning in and listening to us babble for an hour. We hope you've all enjoyed it, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.
Ha!